Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Inclusion. I'm your host Manobina Chakraborty, and today we tackle a key issue: how mainstream teachers can be better trained to support inclusive education. We have two fantastic guests with us. Sreepriya Bhowmik, based in Myanmar, currently brings deep experience in international education and inclusive teaching. And joining us from Mauritius is Dr. Izabelle Grenon, who work. Who, Isabel's work actually focuses on multilingual and multicultural inclusive education. Welcome, both of you. So, before we dive in, could you each share a little about your journey and work? Isabel?
Oh, me? Okay. Sorry.
Yes, please.
I was expecting. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Izabelle Grenon, and I should say originally I'm from Canada. So now I'm based in Mauritius after spending 14 years working and living in Japan. I've been working as a researcher in language acquisition for over 20 years until I retired from my position at the University of Tokyo as an associate professor for over 10 years there, but I retired 2023. I'm now working independently and broadened my research to include uh, research writing and public speaking activities to include matters related to language diversity and cross-cultural relations. So I live in different countries and I feel very close to, I feel very on the topic of a focus on immigrants, right? I like to focus on migrants, whether we call them expats, refugees, or immigrants. I think when we talk about cultural diversity, you can have diversity within a community, but like generational diversity with ancestry, but you also have I think the new immigrant, it's a very different dynamic in many culture about how they are treated, integrated, sometimes discriminated. So that's what I'm working on. So concretely, I offer consultations to educational institutions and as an expert in language acquisition to support or reform their language program to better understand how things works for children acquiring a new language. And I also provide consultations, keynotes, and workshops to organizations planning to hire or who have hired foreign workers to help with coordinating a smooth transition for both the business and all the workers. Right.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming, Isabel. Now, Shripriya, let me come to you once again. So, could you please tell us what you are doing now?
Thank you so much for inviting me over. As you know, I've been a special needs professional for over 29 years now. Oh, yeah. So currently, I'm working as the head of special needs in an international school in Myanmar. After working for more than 2 decades in the UK, moved to Myanmar, and there we are. I'm heading the whole SCN provision, building it up. So currently, we are working towards developing a post 16 pathway for the students because there isn't any provision. So we are supposed to be the only school in Myanmar, which international school who supports children with special needs. And so, yeah, I'm heading the entire project and
Great.
also pursue my PhD at the moment. So,
Oh, so nice. All the best for your PhD, Shripriya.
thank you
So,
so much. Yes,
now,
I do need it.
so let's get started now. Shripriya, let's begin with you. How do different education systems approach teacher training for inclusion? Because you have worked in different countries, that's why I'm asking this to you. And is there any gap still exist? What do you think?
um, yes, definitely. There is a gap. I think the focus is being inclusive education. So we are demanding a lot from the teachers, especially those who are in mainstream, to accommodate
Mhm.
students with special needs, to be able to differentiate effectively, to manage the behavior, to understand. We are expecting them to wear multi hats. And I think there's a huge gap in the training. Yes, the trainings do cover certain aspects of special needs where they know, okay, autism means this, dyslexia means this, and some
A
very
lot of
basic strategies. But going into the details and nitty-gritty of those, how to support their needs, I don't think that's much. That's still an established part of the teacher training curriculum. So,
uh,
but we are expecting the teachers to do a lot. So, I think definitely there's a massive gap there.
yeah, I do think the same way. Isabel, what is your take? How well are teachers prepared for inclusion across different contexts?
Yeah, so for me, the context I know is at the higher educational level, right? So training future professors. So
Mhm.
what do we do? Basically, as far as I know, there's no training for becoming a professor. So people are hired for. I'm not saying that their teaching ability is not valued.
Mhm.
There's some screening process and so on, but I mean there is no um, mandatory course or mandated preparation class for future professors to complete their degree, right? So it's assumed that you hire a professor based on their field of expertise, their contribution to the research field, and to some extent their teaching ability. But it depends. I think it varies from one institution to another how much they value the how much they evaluate. For example, I was on the search committee for a professor's new faculty member in Canada, and the interview is 3 days, and there's lots of interviews, meetings, teaching samples, presenting their research, and that's a full 3 days of interviews. In Japan, they hire a professor. It's maybe just half an hour of interview, and that's it, right? So there's very difference in how people are trained, and yes. So
Same
I
thing
mean
with me.
the PhD students too. I mean, like when you have PhD students, they're future probably professors, faculty members, and in
Mhm.
Canada, I had the opportunity as a grad students to teach a few class myself to design and teach. In Japan, my experience I had so far is that the graduate students are not given any responsibility. Um, there's a cultural reason behind that, but basically the graduate students don't even have any practice. They just hire as teaching assistant. They're not even allowed to correct exams, and so it's very yeah. There's no training whatsoever. They just have to figure it out. Right?
Yeah, same thing everywhere. Sreepriya, in many places, students with behavioral challenges are quickly mislabeled. You know that, right? So, what are the systemic and cultural reasons behind this, in your experience?
I think as a Senko, I'm probably guilty of it. We quickly jump into conclusion about teachers not doing carrying out their responsibility correctly. They should investigate. We are expecting the teachers to be investigator, teacher, social worker, counselor, so many things. And yes, mislabeling does happen. Not only because of because I think in the training there's not enough training for the teachers to understand the whole concept of antecedent of a behavior. So very we are quick, oh, the child cannot focus. Um yes, but why? And teachers often don't have the time, and we often don't have the we assume they know. So we forget as a Senko, I think it's also our responsibility to talk to the teachers, try to explain, and also create that relationship with it. Because often teachers can be very defensive, thinking that when we try to advise something or suggest something, they think we are criticizing. So I think as a special educator in a mainstream school, a lot of responsibilities on our shoulder to build that bridge,
Yeah,
because it's they don't have the training, so they probably are trying their best, but they have to look after other 30 kids as well.
exactly.
So whether we through insets or getting the senior leadership team on board, making part of like regular training, doing more workshops, like simulation activities rather than just standing in front of the whole school and delivering a training on dyslexia means this, you should be doing this. Rather than saying you should be doing this, if we can create the in-house training where we are simulating the condition and getting them to understand how it feels, what to do, and I think that might help. So it's not that they're unwilling to do it, but sometimes it's just the lack of understanding. And so we need to
Yeah.
kind of, as a school, we need to work towards working together, not working against each other. And it's a long way, especially in secondary keys, and upper level where they have to do the board exams, grades. That's where slowly it starts, falling apart. So it's a lot to do with training. And
Yeah.
yes, mislabeling, I
Very
can
much
give you
so.
hundreds
So
of
I would like to,
examples. It's
yeah,
not only about
please.
the learning needs, it's also medical needs. Often student, we don't look into the medical needs of the child. Say we have had a child in one of my job where the child had diabetes. We didn't know about it. And diabetes, its effect on students' learning can be very similar to a child showing ADHD, ODD, lots of things. And nobody knew about the medical condition. So when we came,
Don't
uh,
you maintain a student information book? We do that
yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah. What I'm
parents can
saying
have.
that somehow that was no, because parents identified it, didn't share it with us. They never thought that diabetes
Mhm.
can link with learning needs. So, but when it was by that time, the diagnosis of ODD, ADD had happened.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
parents didn't even share that information with the psychologist. So it is a classic example of mislabeling. So when the
exactly.
medical condition got under control, we saw a reduction in the behavior. So
Yeah,
often, those sort of things like analyzing, trying to find out more, and then sharing the information can help.
yeah, of course. Very much so. Uh, Isabel, students from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds face some other challenges, maybe unique struggles. How can teachers support them effectively?
But um, at the higher level, higher in higher education, I think that
Yes, yes,
it's I think we don't even get to that point. How can teachers support them because they're filtered out from the start, right? So there's entrance exam, and all universities, English-speaking university worldwide, would require students to have a certain level of English. So they will have to do a TOEIC or TOEFL test, and you're not good enough at English, uh, we don't get you in. So the entrance is not to access, especially those highly ranked university, you need to really perform on all measures, including English ability. So I can imagine people with other condition in addition to but not be native speakers, like neurodivergent people might have additional difficulty to get in those schools. So I think the problem is not even like when you have in your class because they're not even there. They don't make it that far. So people who are not able to cope. So the universities, I think, worldwide don't adapt. They filter out really. So
yeah. Shripriya, what do you think about it in your school scenario?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I actually work in a school which is very supportive of special needs. So, first time in all these years, I'm working in an environment where a Senko is part of senior leadership team, and which is a big focus in our school is inclusion, differentiate. Like this next academic year, our main focus will be differentiation. So, yeah, but from my past experience, yes, I have had worked in a school where the head teacher said, if they can't make the grades, kick them out. So, yes, it's very similar to what Isabel said that it sometimes it very much depends on the SLT. But as a Senko or as a head of special needs, it's a struggle, it's a fight, it's a constant battle. But again, as I always tell myself, that if we don't fight for these students, nobody else would.
Yeah.
And also be ready to be what I call my logo is we are like a tissue, wet wipe, once used your thrown. But so we are made up with wet wipes. Our face is like calm Buddha. Body, but it's made up of the um, rhinoceros skin, so it's very thick. Our feet are like duck, but with a big smile. So yeah, we are, and we are like a spare tire of a car. We are not a selling feature, but we are always needed. Fortunately, this time in my school, I've become, old Honda CRV where the spare tire used to be a display feature. Yeah. So now finally, I feel like being Honda CRV uh, Stepney tire, and I'm very proud of it. But yeah, as we were saying that it's important. It's a cultural change, so we have to kind of sensitize the whole SLT, the senior leadership team, board, by doing constant micro training. Don't go for mega training, ambitious training. Create small events where you kind of first make them walk through the shoes of these students. If you're taking them in, how does it feel? Until unless they feel it, they would know. Have sessions organized by the students. That way, kind of creating that understanding is the key step before
Exactly.
otherwise, they will always be filtered out.
So, how many training sessions in a year you conduct in your school?
We, um, we do one proper intensive ones at the beginning of the academic year.
Okay.
Then throughout, during staff meetings, department meetings, we kind of uh, create our own mini sessions.
Okay.
Then when we do autism awareness week, dyslexia awareness week, for the staff, what we do is we do a scavenger hunt, uh,
Okay.
which is kind of find the myth and match it with the truth. So not just always talking about it, just getting them involved. So this
Yeah,
year,
it's a very good
these sort of
idea.
mini things. And also what we have created in my current school is we have got a pastoral team. So every 1 week primary, 1 week secondary, we meet with the school counselor, the teachers. We have got a list. We discuss the student, and then we kind of go and observe, talk to the teachers. Okay, they might not like our input, but then we have to keep on doing it. Yes, you don't like me, I don't care, but you have to do this. You just can't take the insults to your heart. You just keep on doing it, and then finally they give up on us, and they, okay, fine, like those grumpy teenagers, they'll finally do it. Just keep doing it with a smile on your face. Don't get angry.
Exactly.
So trainings, got it. No big ambitious one.
Okay. And Isabel, let me come to you now in your university setting. And if we talk about language, how does language acquisition impact inclusion? You told me previously, but in detail, like as a case study, if you could just give us some example.
Uh, what is it, the question again? Sorry, you cut, so I couldn't hear the full question.
No, it's okay, perfectly fine. So, how does language acquisition impact inclusion? That is my question. And
Okay, so
maybe some myths are there. So, what myths persist about learning new languages?
yes, yeah, so if,
I
for
mean,
example, a migrant child comes into a new class and they don't speak the native language. So I think there's a lot of myth that people assume that children will just pick up the language. Um, and if they're babies, they will pick up the language. But if you're getting older and older, it's getting like even early on. I was in Turkey with my two sons they were, I think, 6 or 7 and about 4, and they went to Turkish school for about half a year and they didn't learn any Turkish. So the problem is that you need meaningful interactions. And I think that, I've met many what we call them returnees. So students in Japan, so their parents are sent to another country and then they come back later. So these are returnees. And I discussed with some of them, and they said the first year is really, really hard. They feel really isolated, not supported. It's very scary because you don't understand anything's going on. So we need to understand from the child perspective that it's not like you just throw it and they're just going to learn to swim. If they haven't learned to swim, they cannot swim, right? It's just not the way it works. So yeah, that's something we need to. So we need to provide support depending on the child as well, and with meaningful input, a lot of input, but meaningful interaction, not just the lecture. They're not just going to pick it up. I live in different countries, and I lived 14 years in Japan, and I hear Japanese every day, and I didn't just pick up the language like this. I have to really focus and learn it. And yeah, I think that's a big myth people still have, and I hear it all the time still, like, oh, if you're in immersion, you're just going to pick up the language. No, it does not work. Even for children, it depends on the age, depends of the child as well. Some people have more like auditory memory for aptitude to learn vocabulary quickly, and they're more outgoing and they will reach out and interact, whereas some child are more shy and reserved and more visual in their learning, and they're more like systematic. They need to see the pattern, understand the pattern of language to learn it. So teaching language even to young children, in some ways, it's important to try to facilitate their integration in the new community.
How receptive are the teachers in the university level to address these issues?
Well, as I said, I was teaching in Japan, and in Japan, they just well, there was an English exam, by the way. I didn't mention that, but to enter that university where I was working, you had to pass the English test as well, even for Japanese. So if you're good at English and you're not so good on other topic, it can compensate and get you in. But if you're average on other topic and you're poor in English, you won't get in, right? So the English plays an important role in admission. But I still had the students from very different level of proficiency, but there was a lot of English class taught in Japanese. And so a lot of students prefer to do that. They were really scared of taking class in English. So they didn't choose my class because they were afraid to get into, to have to speak English. So, but I developed strategies for them. Like, for example, like group discussion doesn't work. So you have to have like small group discussions. And I will say, okay, so I find out that some students really wanted to improve their English and they really wanted to speak, even though they were really shy and were not good. But if the students around them were speaking in Japanese, they felt too shy to try to speak English. So I was dividing the class. I said, those who wants to practice and speak English go this way. And those who really are not comfortable, it's okay, you discuss this way. Because if I didn't do that, they would not discuss. So I had to, and so they were uncomfortable. They could discuss the topics in Japanese or English, and then we'll come back and they will have to write in English, their thought in English, for example. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think teachers and parents can collaborate to support multilingual students, especially when the school or university, the basic language isn't their first language?
Yeah, well, at university, I don't know. I never saw any parents. And the other teachers, people do, they do what they want. At my university, it's just like you teach your class, and as long as you don't have too many complaints, even if you have complaints, you just confirm that you calculated the person got the grade that they deserve, and that's it, right? There was very where you're very in power when you're a professor in Japan. You don't have to worry. Whereas in Canada, it's very different. Students will,
Okay.
go argue twice.
That's
But what
good.
you were talking about was multilingual.
Yes.
So I think that at university, I don't know, because it's very different dynamic. But in elementary school, because as an expert in language acquisition, I studied learning of languages from early on, and I think it's nice we should give more opportunities to use all languages. Like I'm in Mauritius, my kids are going to international schools. I kind of met with a few schools here, to discuss what they're doing, and they don't know what to do. So basically they teach in English with a little bit of French and things, but I feel the focus is very much on learning the language and or another language to open the mind. But some people are not good at learning language, and it backfire. You teach them French to appreciate French, but in the end they hate it. so we know we've been there too. So I
Yeah,
think instead of
yeah, yeah,
I think instead of teaching learning languages, teaching language to learn to speak, we should teach about language, a linguistic approach. And I did a workshop to 10 and 11 years old talking about linguistic diversity and endangered languages, what we can do, things like that. And they were so excited about it. They really participated. They all wanted to answer my questions. And so I think it's a different approach, and it's because studying language, everybody can do it. Learning is like, well, you have to have good memory, but studying languages, how it works, linguistic diversity, language families, and things like that is something that can be implemented in different class. It can include students involving their language that they have at home, not just focusing on what is there. And that could be give them opportunity. And also I think one of the problems that parents do and teachers is to underestimate the ability of students or their children based on production. So he said the wrong word, oh, his language is not good. That doesn't mean he's bad at learning the language. And what we need to understand about acquiring a language is that the way children and people acquire language is that we learn languages. For example, children will learn to say he went there. But then as he progresses, he's learning the rule of the past tense in English, walked. So he start to apply ed, walked, to everything. And he will go say goed instead of went. And then the parents sometimes panic. They say, well, my child is going back. He's going backward. He's not progressing. But these patterns are actually progress, means that he's generalizing some patterns of the language. He's learning. So I think people need to understand, parents and teachers, how language works, and not focus. And there's stage of development. You cannot force children to be at this stage if they're here. So you need to progress with them, especially language. It's not like mathematics. It's or other science or history. You cannot just learn bits by bits. There's a milestones. Sorry.
In India, we have 22 languages with official status. So we face this every day, and all the diagnostic tools and everything are made in English. So for a dyslexia diagnosis, we have only 4 tools in 4 languages, but we have 22 languages with official status. So the diagnosis is also very, very difficult here, and so is the teaching. Sreepriya, what do you think?
Well, at least you have one thing is that in India, urban population more or less can deal with the English diagnostic because they're all culturally standardized. Whereas in Myanmar, I'm trying to do the very basic tests, which are standardized, definitely not culturally standardized because they're all standardized in the US or UK. So half of the time, I have to back it up with the BPV, which is a vocabulary test, and rely a lot on that. First, okay, that's there. And then to write the final report is a fun in itself. Like for everything, I have to justify, like, okay, if it is. So there's no kind of concrete diagnostic tool and lack of professionals. But as I said, that what we are trying to do is micro training, so like dotted throughout the year. And at the moment I'm developing a special needs training program specifically for the local population, so that the teachers and TAs can, from other schools as well, can access it because there's nothing available. So when they're trying to access things delivered by, a big brand from the West, half of the time it's going, like, they can sit there, they have the certificate, but nothing has gone in. So we are kind of making it more culturally appropriate. So diagnostic part is much later for me. For me at the moment is more focused on the training. And what I've realized that when I'm focusing on the training for the local the community, and when I'm working with the expat teachers, the problem is same, the lack of training.
Exactly.
So we have got teachers from various parts of the world, and the main problem is that yes, they know that they have to deal with these things. They are aware of what these conditions are, but are we expecting a lot more from them than they have been trained to deliver?
I
So
know. So, do you think teachers' bias can play a big role in how students are perceived?
of course, because lack of understanding will lead to bias.
And
And
how can training? Yeah, please continue.
what happens is that it's when the pressure is a lot on grades, which is the uh, now we equate educated person as somebody who has got lots of degrees, but education in broader term is basically overall development of one's personality. So when we mix up educated with literate, so your expectation changes, and not everybody can work with students with special needs.
Exactly.
Because some people might just want to be a teacher of English because I love English, I'm not interested in SEN. So, and but we are expecting them to understand, deliver, differentiate everything. They have not been trained for that. So I think that is a big issue, and that's where the bias unknowingly comes into action. And then we say that if the student starts misbehaving, we say, oh, the student is not paying attention, student cannot learn. But the learning gap is because the gap in the teacher's understanding of special needs or the teacher's willingness to accept. And often another thing is that we give
Exactly.
the responsibility of supporting a student with special needs to a teaching assistant who is not suitably qualified or trained. So rather than aiding the learning, we are actually making it worse, because nobody is checking whether the teaching assistant has understood what the teacher is supposed to what the teacher is saying. So the we are expecting the teaching assistant who hasn't got any background in that subject delivering the lesson to the student and explaining it to it, and the student with their own sets of difficulty actually understanding and then making progress. No, it cannot happen. So what happens is the knowledge gap increases, student stops paying attention, so they become, oh god, the disruptive student, the student who misbehaves, the student who's truant, the student who's basically a pain. And the student has got a diagnosis, and then we start talking about all the students' behavior, and you sit and think you're just describing the diagnosis. But then we see the diagnosis is based on previous perception, which is a bias because the teacher was not interested. And
Yeah.
all those missed opportunities gives rise to a mislabeling, and then the bias happens, and it's a vicious cycle.
Exactly. So, are there any globally recognized behavior observation tools that help teachers better understand students?
I haven't come across any. Actually, I'm looking for one to
Yeah.
implement for my PhD study. But the problem is that okay, we have created, honestly, I have created something which teachers can use. And I've been trying to use it for many years. But again, it's lack of understanding of
Yeah.
the special needs, lack of training in using the behavior tool. So if I'm going to implement the behavior tool, which I've created, behavior monitoring tool, that I have created, again I have to make sure that they are trained in using it. And also, especially, the interpretation of the behavior tool can vary from teacher to teacher. What is acceptable by one teacher might not be acceptable from another teacher. So that consistency is not there. Some teacher who's much more confident with SCN might tolerate some behavior, whereas somebody who has got, like, I haven't got time for it, might not tolerate it. So that again, you're sending the student a very confusing signal. I could get away with that behavior in that class, not in this class. So I don't like this teacher. So the conflict starts, behavior starts, and again it gets into that blown out of proportion. So that consistency in training, the consistency in, I think, understanding the child's need is very important.
Exactly. Yeah. Isabel, did you work with blind students in Japan?
Yeah, I just one time, I have a
Yeah.
student who was, so I was asked to adapt my material, um, but it went very
So
well because, pardon me?
what strategies helped make teaching materials more inclusive in your class?
Yeah, well, with her it was very simple. She was just blind. She didn't have any cognitive impairment or any difficulty with learning. So it was just adapting the material. And I think that when we think about people with disabilities, sometimes we want to be too much there every step of the way. And I don't think it's a good approach because people, they're independent. I mean, when they arrive at the university, they've been doing fine all by themselves. Of course, they need
Yeah.
sometimes a little support. So what the support I was asked to provide, and I asked the students what she needed, and she said, "All I need is the document to be available, like in text format,
Okay.
where readable by text to speech." So she was using a text to speech, and when I present, for example, slides on PowerPoint slides in the class, I tried to describe them so that she could understand what this is about, especially there was a figure or something, because it's the kind of thing. So figures and pictures, it's something she's missing out on. So to try to just describe, like you do, like in closed captioning in I don't know how it's called, but in the books, you have like description of the figures or the pictures for people who are visually impaired. So yeah, it was just that, and basically she was doing like everybody else, and I mean she was a really bright student, so she had no problem. But I let her be, and I said, if you need anything, just ask me, and I will adapt this. And I said, is this okay? And I will check on things. And she had some support to go from class to class to find the right class. So she had somebody assistant for her. So she had some support for that. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Sreepriya, let me come to you now. What best practices from around the world help teachers create classroom responsive to diverse student needs, according to your experience?
I think if instead of just making it like specific for the student, then we kind of not being very inclusive. Some of the things that we are trying to implement is a whole school policy on the font that needs to be used. So
Mhm.
there are some dyslexia friendly fonts which are, and which they can use as a standard practice all over the school. Then if you're creating a presentation, make it a much more SEN friendly background with the so like light cream, not white, black on white. So those sort of whole school approach. Then the font size, making it 14. He have some space, so which makes it easier. And another thing that we are trying to implement is uh, keeping in mind the people, the students who might be colorblind. So going using those, not using red and green, because that is one of the key colors they might struggle with. Trying to change the colors that used for marking scheme as a whole school approach can can make the whole school very inclusive, because then you're not saying that, oh, I have to do it because I've got x student in my class. No, everybody is using it. So even so then you're not really pointing it at one particular student, or
Yeah.
But if somebody needs to use an enlarged paper, that's okay, and that you can always talk to the student. And that, I think, when they see that certain things, say using a bigger font, a changed font, uh, different colored background, can actually reduce the need for having an enlarged sheet or using a colored overlay, then
Yeah.
having movement break as a part of the classroom practice.
Mhm.
So I observed one teacher where she had two students with ADHD who needed movement break. Rather than making it obvious for them, every 10 minutes she would do something, and all the students, they had to get up, move one chair, and then they get back, and they just loved it. So nobody sometimes we have the named students, but actually everybody benefits from it. Then
Exactly.
another big thing is like fidget toys. They can be so annoying, like those noisy ones. One, we have implemented this called the blue tack. So they're lovely. They are easily replaceable, not noisy, doesn't damage anything. They're discreet. So the child who needs to fiddle with it can fiddle with it. I've got one at home who does that. But and it's okay. Teacher can just give it. So the sensory needs taken care of with that. So these small adjustments as a whole school thing can make a huge difference in the neurotypical students. And sometimes, Monobina, are you there? I'm not sure. I think, oh, you're there. We have lost her.
Oops.
So yeah, sometimes making these minute, small changes, these accommodations as a whole school thing can make a huge difference. Um,
Exactly.
with the onset of technology, some instead of asking everybody to write, sometimes everybody can actually take turns to type, or maybe somebody is using speech to text to dictate. Person who struggles with writing can use speech to text, and the others can then do the proofreading and things like that.
Yeah.
There's also, you just need to think out of the box. One thing is, often tell teachers that, what, we tell the students to think out of the box, but we want them to think outside their box but stay within our box. And that doesn't help, because we have to remember that now these kids are much more stimulated than we are. They can't even watch a 29 seconds reel. It has to be like this within the first 1 or 2 seconds, otherwise gone. So we are dealing with that generation. So is it actually ADHD? There's so many things. So we need to update ourselves. I think as a teachers, we often forget that we need to be student first. We always try to be on that side of the table and go like, yep, we are right. No, we need to sometimes go on that side of the table and see the world. One thing is, one way one of the teachers actually check the understanding is asking all the teachers to students to be a teacher for a day. So to check their understanding, you don't always have to give paper based assessment. Differentiation is this as well. I think somebody said the resource limited schools, what are some of the low cost strategies? This is a brilliant. If you want to check their understanding, you can have your own tick sheet, and you can ask each student to go in front, talk about it, create a presentation, let them showcase what they have learned. If they're
Yeah.
not happy, and especially in primary school, it's not that difficult. They're not sitting for any board exams. You can create your own tick list. If they're doing spelling test and you want to go over, they don't always have to write. You can play a game of, you spell it out and they guess what the word is, and you tick who got how many, and then you have got your scores as well. So it's like, just we as a teachers, we need to think out of the box.
I used to do this a lot when I was a teacher in mainstream school, especially in the elementary stage. I used to do this a lot. Sreepriya, if you could push for one global policy change to better equip teachers for inclusive education, what would it be?
I think uh, one of the key thing for me should be the teachers. They should not only, during their teachers training practice, they should not only be kind of trained to teach their subject, but they should specifically be they should be given exposure to special schools, how to, what it is, the range of special needs. And also an integrated part of, I think, the teachers training should actually be therapy. Even I'm not talking about getting them trained as occupational therapists or physiotherapists, but part of the curriculum should be actually understanding therapy and how it can very easily be incorporated into day-to-day teaching, especially for primary, when you have got the freedom to explore. I think sometimes we just focus on literacy, numeracy, science, humanities, and forget that all those things can be taught in various ways. We tell them, but if they can have this therapy part in their training, that will really help the teachers understand special needs and how effectively they can differentiate. And differentiation is not only for those with special needs, but equally
Mhm.
for EAL learners, also for gifted and talented. So one thing I've realized that when we talk about differentiation, only thing that comes into mind is SEN. No, it's like all learners.
Yeah. So our viewers are actually very enthusiastically participating through the comment section. Let us take their questions now. How can we address resistance from mainstream teachers who feel that inclusion adds to their workload rather than enhances their teaching? Who would like to take this? Isabel?
Uh, Sorry, I lost the question. Well, I'm not really I'm not doing teacher training per se for. I mean, I'm working with cultural differences, but not like diversity, like people who are neurodivergent or something like that. So I think maybe Sreepriya have maybe better something to say about this.
As I already mentioned, this is mainly to do with those training and empowering teachers.
Mhm.
Uh, and once we help them understand, then we will see a reduced resistance. And if we can make it kind of an integral part of the teacher's training, then they will not see as an kind of an extra workload, because they haven't got an understanding of what is differentiation, how to manage behavior, what to look for. So if I don't know these things, then it will be difficult. So I don't after being an senko for since 2007, one thing I've realized is that the resistance is because they don't know what to
Exactly.
do, how to do. But we are demanding a lot. Pressure is from us, pressure is from government, pressure is from SLT. And often we don't give them training, we don't give them resources, but we want them to do it. So just like as I said, that I haven't got a
Yeah.
magic wand to change, they also haven't got a magic wand. So I think it's a kind of a ethos towards teacher training which needs to be changed. That if you want an inclusive classroom, teachers need to be trained, teachers need to have exposure, that needs to be part
Yeah.
of their teacher training practical session, where they are actually spending time in special schools, getting trained by special educators, not that understanding of what is autism, what is dyslexia, that they can watch in YouTube as well, but actually working with a special educator, working with
Yeah.
therapists to understand the practical aspect of it is will reduce the resistance.
Yeah, I think the same way the hands-on sessions with special educators will benefit, and also I think teachers can have short-term, high-impact training sessions if the school management can organize that. Uh, like on universal learning, universal design for learning (UDL). This is something I think a very good thing to know for mainstream teachers to implement inclusion in their classrooms, and also some behavioral management techniques from the special educators if they can learn. Next question. I can't see everything. Yeah, many mainstream teachers feel unprepared of to manage students with diverse needs. What are your thoughts on this? What are the most effective short term training programs that can help them develop inclusive teaching strategies? Yes, you can take it for your language development as well, Isabel, and of course, Sreepriya, in your school situation. Who would like to start?
Um, One thing I mentioned before for higher education. So when
Mhm.
professors are becoming professors, they usually have no training into teaching. We're just
Yeah.
thrown in the water and say you figure it out. And so there's no training. And the thing is that once you start working as a professor, you're busy. You have very little time, especially if you have a family. It's very. I was working maybe 60 hours a week, often all year round. I didn't have like a big holiday. Um, so it's very hard to do professional development after you start. So I really think that the training should have. I'm sorry, I'm not answering the question for a short-term training, but the point that I'm trying to say is that it should be done before people start their um, uh, working working on the things, because you say, well, maybe you can just figure it out, but no, I mean, you have very little time for this, right? And yeah, so I think Manobina is coming back.
I think you're right. It's just before they start teaching, the training should be in place. But whether you are dealing with, because I know many of my one of my student who is doing was just actually finished her PhD. She had autism, and we were having this discussion, and she said that it's a lack of understanding from the professors about what I need is I'm cognitive. My cognitive ability is okay, I can deal with the demands, but my sensory needs can often be overwhelming for me. So it would have been much easier for me to follow it if the professors were aware of it, because she was doing her PhD in something in the field of chemistry, which is way beyond me. But so cognitive ability wise, okay, but sometimes the sensory overload or that understanding from the professors would have been helpful for us. So I think, yeah, some kind of training before they start would be good. I'll just
And
carry on. Oh,
I,
Monovina, are you back? Yeah, fine.
I was saying while we're waiting for her, I was watching a video of an expert on ADHD, and one thing he was saying is that schools will give more time to complete an exam. And he said, this is the worst thing you can do for a kid with ADHD, is to give them
Exactly.
more time. You have to have like a time schedule to like a short periods, divide the exam in short periods so that
Yeah.
they can see the end and do it within that time. Otherwise, they lose their focus if there's too many time,
and
much time.
and that's why during exams what we give is called supervised stress break. So as soon as we see and a prompter, so who just goes and literally gives a physical prompt that come back, and then they can take a break for 5-10 minutes, and then they resume their exam to kind of recalibrate their thinking brain. And that doesn't, so then you don't need extra time, but they're getting the extra time the way they need it. Because when you give them that extra 25% at the end of the exam, they haven't got a clue what to do with that extra time. They probably wouldn't realize that they have extra time. Whether they had it or not, it doesn't make any difference. So yes, when we put this accommodation, it's very important that, again, they need to know. And I'm seeing more and more, uh, oh, they need extra time. No, they don't need extra time. It's again that training on understanding. I was having a conversation with one of the primary teachers few months back, from one of my previous schools, and she was saying, oh, in primary we have to teach the child how to write. The child has got dyspraxia. And I said, there's no way he will be able to cope up with the writing. Why don't you move to speech to text? Then the gap of the learning gap will not increase. Oh no, he has to learn. And I said, look, when he is doing his board exams, he will be able to use a laptop. He will be able to use speech to text. And she was like, will they? And that made me realize that in primary, they don't know what's happening further on. Again, that lack of understanding. Yale students straight away into the mainstream classroom without building their English level. and we're expecting them to access the curriculum at grade level. If they can't, oh, then maybe SEN. That again, the training of what is SEN and what is EAL need, how to differentiate, when it should raise an alarm, those sort of part should be, I think, in my opinion, must be made mandatory in teachers training. I think we are losing Monobina. I'll just carry on with the
Yeah.
next question.
I have a
Yeah.
question for you. Actually, what do you think about, if we? Oh, she's coming back. Let's see.
Yeah.
Well, I can ask. So if the teachers adapt their classroom for inclusivity, but if we adapt the teaching to suit the needs of every students, um, how does it help students to be able to cope later in life with the demand of the workplace and things like that? So in a real life situation,
You
because you cannot
yeah,
expect always things to adapt to you. You have to also learn
exactly. And
strategies, right?
that is where intervention and giving them strategies to deal. Not That's why we take away in my school, we are reducing in class support. We are providing more intervention sessions to help them develop the strategies. Say, for example, somebody with dyscalculia. Yeah. If we are expecting them to recall the number facts, they will never be able to recall it. That doesn't mean that they cannot learn maths. So they can actually, if the teacher in real life, they will use a calculator. So teaching them how to use a calculator effectively and correctly is much more important, and understanding the maths calculations, that the application of maths is more important. I've seen teachers spending n number of hours trying to teach the student how to tie a shoelace. Well, teach them put their slip-ons. We are not talking about when we are talking about teaching them or adapting them. We are not talking about simplifying them. We are talking about enabling them, accommodating their needs, so that they can function independently. The focus should be independent. When we put a teaching assistant next to, or a shadow teacher next to them, telling them at every step what to do, what to do, you end up having a student who has not been enabled, who has you have actually disabled the child.
Exactly.
So that's where again the teacher training comes in play, where the teachers can then learn what is it to have support. It's not. It's like I often use this analogy where if you have got a creeper, you will need a stick for to help the creeper grow and bloom to the fullest. So that stick is not their crutch, but it's the accommodation we are providing. So if we don't give that stick, it will wither and it will die. So do we want the creeper to die? No, it's a creeper for a reason. So that's the way I'm trying to explain it to the teachers, that the accommodations are not to disable the child, but to make sure we understand. My daughter, she um, has got dyslexia, and recently we tried having a reader and extra time for her maths exam. From getting zero in her maths exam, in one shot she got a 60%. It's just somebody reading the question out to her and writing it for her. Before that, she couldn't. She was getting zero. So we tried the next time. We tried it again without a teacher reading, without a reader and extra time. Again, it went down to 30%, not zero, because we have enabled her. So it's
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly. Can you see me and hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so very unstable internet connectivity here. I have logged in through my phone now, so maybe yeah, I may be frozen in at any point. So I would like all to like both of you to read the questions on Facebook later on, and if possible, please answer the questions what audience, our viewers have asked. So let's conclude this meeting because of this unstable internet connectivity. So before we leave, do you have anything to say to the school managements or the teachers for any kind of training, proper training for inclusion in both schools and university settings. So, please, Sreepriya, for schools.
For schools, if you're a Senko head of overseeing the whole provision, please focus on micro training, constant micro training. It's a drip. Remember, SCN awareness is a drip irrigation method. Constantly keep on giving training. Don't take the criticisms personally. Don't take any kind of always give it a big smile, and you'll face lots of experts giving us lots of opinion. Listen to everybody. When you go, do not react to the situations, act. So carry your ammunitions and then go for it. Do not give up. Change, permanent change will be slow. You'll have resistance, but as I say, think out of the box, create lots of happy training sessions, fun training sessions, rather than telling them what, rather than you talking, let them do it. And maybe organize talks by during training, get the students to speak, get speakers with disability to come and talk to the teachers, to the management, and yeah, get therapists to talk, and I'm always happy to share more
Thank you
ideas.
so much. Thank you, Sreepriya. Isabel, your concluding suggestions, please.
Well, I would like to see the primary and high school, middle school. I would like to see schools with multicultural children to really work to not alienate people and make them feel segregated by saying, "Oh, okay, today we're going to talk about difference, and you're different." Well, cultural difference is nice, the difference, but if we keep emphasizing the difference and the linguistic difference, and valuing like a standard language is detrimental to development of the child. And at the university level, what I would like to see universities not basing their admission of students based on English score, but providing support for maybe like a training program for students to catch up, to be able to take the class, because the point is that they want a higher English level so that they can cope with the material and the class content. But they could have a conditional period where they try to improve 1 semester, 2 semester before entering the program, because some students have really good potential, but maybe they didn't have the occasions in their own home country to actually push their English to the level that will be enough to follow a class, right?
Can I say one more thing? If you
Yes,
if you
please.
want to this is my to go strategy to force people to do something, is always read through the education policy or the mandatory guidelines from the government. Read through it very carefully, and then every time you find resistance, pick it up, show it to the senior leadership team or management, and say, okay, this is mandatory, so how can you justify not providing it? And you'll not be loved, but we are not here to be loved. If you're a Senko, it's a very lonely journey. So be ready to be a loner, and just at every possible opportunity, just show them the mandatory guidelines, and then finally they will realize that, okay. And also empower the parents, talk to them about what is mandatory, and so that they, if they know what their child should get, then they can put the pressure, and then when the pressure comes from both sides, things will start changing. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Isabel and Sripriya. What an enlightening discussion we had today. Uh, you had incredible insights, and thank you for sharing those. Inclusive education is essential, and teachers play a crucial role in making it a reality, of course. I have very poor internet connectivity at present, so our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in. We hope today's conversation encourages you to advocate for better teacher training and inclusive classrooms. Until next time, stay informed and keep pushing for a more inclusive world. Till then, goodbye and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.